in all its extremities, in all its difficulties at the moment. With us on the panel is His Excellency Salvatore Sciacchitano, who is the President of Icao, which is, for those who are not familiar, the UN body responsible for aviation. Sir Tim needs no introduction, but he'll get one anyway. Sir Tim of Emirates, Sir Tim Clark. Luis Felipe de Oliveira is from ACI, which is the Airports Council International, and the Senator Hadi Sirika from Nigeria, who is with us today as the Minister of Aviation from Nigeria. There is much to talk about as we go through this. We start, of course, you can't talk about the future of aviation at the moment and not talk about Ukraine and Russia. So to you, sir, Icao is the UN body responsible for aviation. Are you going to suspend or kick Russia out?
Thank you, Richard, for this easy question. I would say that the role of Icao is not to suspend member states. Of course, this is to adopt standards and to support member states to implement them well. When there are violations, of course, there will be actions to be taken, but will not be taken just without the due process. The situation in Ukraine is generating a serious concern for us, for safety perspectives, due to the flight over and the near conflict zones, and the consequences that will determine in the short, medium, and long term. If you wish, we can address a little more.
Right, but let's just take the Russia issue, because Russia is also before Icao, or will be, for the tribunal over MH17, which was shot down. So I guess if Icao is to have any credibility, sir, you have to be seen to take action on one or other front.
Yeah, you're right. There is a specific provision in the Chicago Convention where the Council of Icao is a role of a judge, is a court that can take actions, but there is a due process to be done. You mentioned MH17. Just last week, Australia and the Netherlands submitted to Icao what is called a file under Article 84. That's a dispute submitted to the Council of Icao, and the Council of Icao will address this issue with hearings, of course, and if there will be a responsibility that will be determined by the Council as a court, is a judicial court, actually, from this perspective, can even take a decision to suspend the right to be part of the organization.
I guess what people want to know, but I guess what people want to know, and then we'll move on, I guess what people want to know is that something's going to be done. That it's not, I mean, a good example is the UNWTO, which says it's going to suspend Russia, but it's going to take 3 months to do it.
It will require a due process. That doesn't mean 3 months or 6 months. That means that there will be a need to submit all the evidences, and then the Council can decide.
So Tim, how difficult is aviation at the moment? You're coming out of a pandemic, there's huge demand, and then you've got this.
Well, let's just deal with COVID first. It's probably the most traumatic thing that's hit the airline business and the global economy since the Second World War. And we're having to deal with that, and you're absolutely right. We're now seeing a resurgence of demand across all our countries on our network and the segments within those. So we're actually seeing some very good positive movement across our network. But at the same time, now we have the Ukrainian issue, which of course is possibly more serious in terms of civil aviation and other areas in the global economy than the COVID pandemic. And I say that simply because from a civil aviation point of view, from an airline point of view, the notion that going forward with the what I would call the economic Iron Curtain moving to the east and the exclusion of Russia in the future and its civil aviation power that it has is going to cause a tectonic shift in the way airlines and the aviation business goes about its business.
You say it's going to, it's already caused it, hasn't it? I mean, you've got the leased aircraft in Russia that are now in some no man's land, if you will. You've got overflight, which is not possible. How do you see the How do you see it developing out, if you will?
Personal opinion, like all major traumas that face the global community in the last 70 years, there will be a resolution to this, one way or the other. It cannot go on indefinitely. Nobody's going to win on this, and everybody will suffer if we're not careful, not the least of which are the people in Ukraine. So we have to find, the global community has to find a resolution. And surprisingly, if you'd asked me this question 20 years ago, the same thing had happened, I would say, yes, this looks like a paradigm shift in what's going to happen to the global economy. But if this gets sorted sooner rather than later, the pressure of globalization, the pressure of demand from multiple sectors within the global economy will be such that we can get through this. The longer it goes on, the more difficult it becomes to deal with.
I need to ask you that you're still flying to Russia. Why?
Well, there's two reasons. Obviously, the ownership have not directed us to do otherwise. And so as long as we are not told not to operate to Russia, we will continue to do so. But don't forget, these sanctions are not against the Russian people, the Russian citizens. They still are people like you and me, and they want to be able to travel. There are lots of reasons why we fly. We carry humanitarian goods in our holds. We've got NGOs traveling in and out of Russia. We've got the diplomatic community going in and out of Russia. And a lot of the developing world, which is perhaps not part of the sanctions regime, need to deal with Russia in their own way. So all we're doing is being an enabler, facilitator, without taking a political position on this for the time being. And so long as the state, our owner, requires us to fly there, we will continue.
Turning to the airports, ACI, as we come out of the pandemic, and we've now got more turmoil, what is it you want from governments, from regulators?
Well, I think we start with the one topic that I always touch base. The first one is we are one of the safest transport in the world, and safest industries in the world. And we are now in a position that we are in the hands of the health authorities. That's why basically the aviation lost the power to take their own decisions. In that way, we cannot harmonize a system, and you cannot harmonize a system that you go to the risk bureau basis as requested by the health authorities.
But we did a dreadful job during the pandemic of harmonizing restrictions, regulations. Would you agree?
Well, we supported the work that Icao did. Icao did a Council of Aviation Recovery Task Force that basically provide the guidelines to the countries to reopen.
But the country's minister ignored in many cases what Icao said. They said don't close down. They said you don't need to do this. They said you don't. And the countries did it anyway.
Well, the countries have to do it at the time. Look at the case of Nigeria. We have 200 million people in Nigeria, and most of them living closely together. In cities jam-packed by 20 million people, Lagos, 40 million people, Kano. Something got to be done, otherwise people will die. So we went on, closed the country immediately at the time, and that's why in Nigeria, up to today, there are only 3,500 deaths, and just about 250,000 infections, and 245,000 discharged from hospital.
Do you believe those numbers?
Yes, I do. Otherwise, you would have seen Nigerians going to the grave unexplained. Yes. So it worked very well, but then gradually it began to ease out, and business is coming. Don't forget, at the time before COVID, Nigeria aviation becomes the fastest growing sector of the economy.
Right, so
the airlines are doubled, the passenger number are quadrupled, number of airlines doubled, number of airports doubled, all within the Buhari administration of 6 years.
Now, in the interest of transparency, I did discuss this with the minister. He knows where I'm going here. Are you committed to having an open, transparent, private sector aviation industry with open skies?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when we came in 2015, the Buhari government, to which I have become a minister so far, we are committed to a roadmap to establish a national carrier, to concession the airports, to set up a leasing company, to establish cargo facilities, and we've just been doing that, and aviation has quadrupled.
Why do you want a national carrier?
So because Nigeria is situated at the center of Africa, equidistant from all locations. Africa is 30.4 million square kilometers of landmass, 1.4 billion people, a very green and virgin land. And Nigeria, if Central and West Africa is the belt of Africa, Nigeria is the buckle, because 200 million people, rising middle class, propensity to fly is high. Nigeria is a candidate for a national carrier. That's why Emirates...
A private national carrier or a
private,
state?
Private, 100% private, 5% government, and no government step-in rights in that airline, no government control, no membership of board, totally private, committed to private sector.
You won't be able to keep your hands off it.
No, no, who says?
I do, I've seen it before.
Well, but whatever we said we would do in this government from 2015, it has happened. That's why Team Clark today, Emirates, Qatar, all of them, they are looking to go to Nigeria in multiple frequencies and multiple landing points, because Nigeria is the candidate, the best country to provide airline business, because the people travel
Would you get involved?
next to nothing.
Would you get involved if you could?
I think, well, let me just take the first question you asked the Minister. Is there a business case for a national carrier, private carrier, whatever it may be? Of course there is, because for the very reasons he said, it's a powerhouse of Africa. So there is an enormous compelling business case to do it. And quite honestly, and as the Minister says, we're all very interested in flying there because it's a very rich nation in terms of the demand for services and, of course, the price that people are prepared to pay. And the Nigerians are seeking to travel all over the world, so it's clear for me that that's the case. If the Nigerian government, the minister, needs some assistance in how they go about and perhaps a blueprint of it, we are very happy to help them. But I would say, not to be too disingenuous to ourselves, I think they've got the wherewithal. They've obviously, from what I just heard, they are clearly understanding what needs to be done, and they're doing it. And I think probably in the next year, they'll have a very good carrier flying, and good luck to them. I hope they come to Dubai.
Thank you very much.
Because there's so much demand.
On this question with airports, I want to talk about the on-the-ground experience.
Well,
it's pretty awful in many cases.
Most of the airports in Africa and the 2/3 of the airports in the world are in the hands of the governments. And what is especially for Africa itself, not only for Nigeria, Africa has 15% of the global population, only 2% of the global air traffic. That's why the potential is huge, not only in Nigeria itself, but in the whole continent. That's why we need to find a way that we can break the restrictions that we have to fly inside of Africa and outside of Africa to bring more passengers the opportunity to fly there.
If we look at the aviation industry globally, do you think the slot restriction and the slot method, I saw Tim wince at the mention of slots, do you think it needs a wholesale revision?
Yes. The 80% rule in this pandemic didn't work for airlines, for airports. I think we need to revisit the process. That's why the regulatory framework that is applied today need to revisit at a certain point. What I saw is that there's a lot of integration and discussion between the airlines, the slots coordinations, and the airports to apply different approach according with the region, according to the specifics of the region that we are facing today.
Do you see, Tim, Europe still protectionist when it comes to aviation?
I think this could be a byproduct of what is happening in the European geopolitics at the moment. So we're just a little bit worried that that might happen. But as I said earlier, the pressure of globalization, the multiple sectors within it will push us through that. To the problem about slots, the slot issues are a product of non-availability. That's what it's all about. And so long as the airports, the governments, or whatever in the world do not invest in airports to create more capabilities, then the slot issue is going to become far more acute in the next 5 or 10 years. One looks at Heathrow, Third Runway, Sydney, Hong Kong, you name it, Sao Paulo, they've all got major issues. The problem is that if you are going to invest in these airports, it either requires government or state or private backing. A lot of the balance sheets of the airports are shot to pieces, so that's going to be a problem. So that's why we're keeping the 380 flying for as long as we can, because those slots are going to be highly attractive to others.
Not with fuel prices at the current levels.
You know, we've dealt with fuel prices at $140 back in May 2009. They're down a bit now. We're just going to have to manage through it. We will.
So how do you make Icao relevant? I mean, at the moment, it's an organization, you know, I can think in 30 years of covering aviation, I've interviewed somebody from Icao. I was going to say the fingers of one hand, but I would say the fingers on the fingers of one hand.
Well, you have an opportunity to start a new phase. Actually, with the change of leadership in Icao, we have launched a modernization process. Modernization process, that means this is an organization that has 70 years. And that is good for the rules that are very solid, not good for the practices that have been, let's say, overlapped years after years. So we have launched a process of modernization. I would say that the experience done with the pandemic is an example on a different approach that we adopted, for example, in cooperation with the industry. Cooperation with the industry became closer, and the recommendation, we were not prepared for the pandemic. That's a matter of fact. Nobody was prepared, including Icao. So, but the ability to react has been fast thanks to a different approach, in particular with the industry. You mentioned that recommendations have been not implemented by governments or not fully implemented by the government. This is very disappointing because we have seen that closing the borders more on emotional reactions than the actual evidence has been not effective.
So, as we come to the end, a couple of minutes left, curious, Minister, when you cease to be Minister, what's the one change you will have hoped to have effected? What's the one thing you want to have seen happen in Nigeria's aviation industry?
Well, I would like to see that Nigerian aviation industry continue to be private sector led and driven, and that there is more efficiency and safety in the sector. And doing that, we have added 50 million capacity to 4 airports. Recently, we're building more runways, we're treating the issues of airness, and all of those things that will make aviation smooth, efficient, safe, and the most preferred option of transportation. And if you look at continentally Africa, the only way that AU Agenda 2063 can be achieved really is by aviation, because rail and road takes a tremendous amount of quantum money to establish and to maintain over a continent of 54 countries in 30.4 square kilometers of land.
Director General, you're not going to answer this question, but I'll ask it anyway. Your favorite airport?
My favorite airport? I'll be in trouble if I do that.
Sorry?
I will be in trouble if I do that. We have a very good quality system that analyzes the airports for different sizes, and we have more than 100 airports that received awards last year. That's why it depends of the size, depends.
Okay, I'll rephrase the question.
Okay.
The airport you dread going through.
One airport, I used to live in Netherlands many, many years, and I think it's because of the size of the airport. I love to connect, for example, in Amsterdam. It's a great airport to connect, but if I need to take my favorite airport was Geneva. I spent 15 years living there.
Oh,
so it was easy to connect. And the most beautiful airport in the world is Santos Dumont in Rio de Janeiro, Rio City Airport.
But you gave Abuja an award.
Abuja award.
An award,
well.
yes.
That's why one of
he gave Abuja an award. Yes, he gave Abuja an award. Because
was it a bad day for the other airports?
No. He has seen that we've improved the capacity of civil aviation in Nigeria. 8 million to 18 million passengers in 4 years. Aviation, we have debunked in Nigeria that aviation doubles every 15 years. It is now quadrupling in Nigeria under Buhari in 6 years.
Tim, are you going to have the last laugh with these A380s? Everybody thinks you are barking mad having these planes. 4 engines, lots of seats, high fuel prices, expensive airports.
Well, in answer to the question, in the time that we've had them and prior to the pandemic, they produced about 80% of our profits, irrespective of all the things you mentioned. We have a wonderful... Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not sure whether that was for your profits or for the plane.
Well, look, I mean, we're making profits now. We're very cash positive. Things are going really well. We have all these airplanes flying. They are going to be more unique going forward. The consumer demand for these aeroplanes is astronomical. We're going to refurbish them, refresh them, put more innovation into them. They're going to be something really special over the next 10 or 15 years. Watch the space.
Watch this space, indeed. We're out of time. Short but to the point. The future of aviation. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
This year is on pace to set a record for ice melt here in the Arctic.
This warming is enough to bring about the raft of effects we call climate change.